Welcome back to Morning at NTV and thank you for staying with us. My name is Romeo Busiku. We are getting into our Kickstarter conversation for the day. Last week ended on a rather high note for the National Resistance Movement. The party claimed to have met over 77.9% of its election promises and will commence activities to showcase its manifesto in the middle of the country's fight against the coronavirus pandemic. The week also gave us the most discussed news item over the weekend. This is about a report by some that NRM members of parliament will be receiving 40 million Uganda shillings as, in quotes, a thank you. Well, to discuss these issues and a lot more, I do have the Lord Mayor of Kampala, Erias Lukwago, who is also joined by Henry Mayiga, the Deputy Ambassador to China. He's also an NRM mobilizer. Both gentlemen join me right now in studio. A very good morning, Mr. Mayiga and Mr. Lukwago.
Good morning.
Let me start with you, Mr. Mayiga, in the far left. Should we be celebrating a manifesto to begin with now that we are grappling with the COVID-19 pandemic?
Absolutely, because this, in my view, is happening for the first time in the history of the country, that this administration, the OM7 administration, does accountability and showcases the achievements so far made. And these are many, and of course during the course of this coming week, ministers and heads of agencies and really ministers and the heads of agencies will be coming out with the lists of the achievements as they are, so that people can get to know what the administration has actually done since they were elected, because the manifesto was sold to the people of Uganda in 2016, and the NRM was elected, of course, as a result. And because of that election, you must show as to how far you've gone in as far as the mandate is concerned, because that is the nature of democracy, that is the most important thing to do. And for me, I'm really very happy that they are coming out, that the OM7 administration is coming out with these achievements so that people can appreciate them. And there are many. The most important one that I want to mention off cuff is the one of peace, security and stability in the country. That's extremely important, because if there was no security, if there was no stability, if there was no peace in this country, I wouldn't be here with the Lord Mayor in the studio talking about these things. But because there is peace, of course there's a lockdown at the moment, but that's really being wrought on us as a result of an extraneous problem, which is the COVID. But peace, security and stability is or are really very important things in as far as the country is concerned, because we can't talk about agriculture, you cannot talk about provision of energy, you cannot talk about the rest of the performing sectors in the country if you don't have peace, security and stability in the country. Extremely important. And of course, we must thank the President for giving all the agencies that are responsible for keeping peace, security and stability, like the police, like the UPDF, the intel services, you can talk about the LODs, and so on and so forth, who are actually at the forefront in as far as providing for these things. Extremely important in my view.
And of course, Mr. Mayiga, peace and security has been at the forefront of President Museveni's manifesto since he took over power. But then Tuesday last week, May 12th, so it marked actually 4 years since the president did actually embark on the manifesto implementation in 2016, when we actually elected him. Besides peace and security, the viewer would like to know, what are some of those other achievements you can verifiably offhand boast of as an NRM stalwart?
Of course, as I said before, peace, security and stability are extremely important, because without those three, then you cannot talk about the rest of the sectors in the country. But I just want to mention, for purposes of consumption of Ugandans and listeners and viewers, that, for instance, when it comes to works and transport, let me just begin with that one, because there has been a lot really happening in there. We are talking about, for instance, the construction of the fast-hanging bridge in this country, in Jinja, complete.
Nile Bridge, okay.
Absolutely complete. The first of its kind in the country. Factual, no contestation and all these kinds of things. It is there to serve the country, it's there to serve the region and so on and so forth. We are talking about the Entebbe Express Highway, which is complete.
Indeed.
And that is a plus, of course, to the Yoweri Museveni administration. You can talk about the expansion of Entebbe International Airport, which is also a plus. And of course, upgrading the rest of the airfields in the country. That has been happening for a very long time. You can talk about the additions in terms of the road network in the country, over 1,500 kilometers already added to the existing ones, which have been constructed over the years, and so on and so forth. So when it comes to works and transport, that has been really something that has gone on for in these last 4 years, and making it very easy for people to travel, making it very easy for people to do business, making it very easy for people to access all corners of the country, from Kisoro to Moroto to Nimule and Arua and all these kinds of places. Name it. Everywhere you go in the 4 corners of the country, the road network has been improved, and you can access these things in just one single day. For me, that is a plus in as far as works and transport is concerned in the country. And of course, you can mention about the revival of Uganda Airlines, which was also in the manifesto. That has come to pass because the planes have come into the country, and of course additions are going to be made before the end of this year. If God, for instance, pacifies the country, and of course the COVID pandemic is brought to a stoppage, all these things are going to be functioning pretty well. And for me, as far as I'm concerned, these are actually very big pluses to the country. And we must thank the Yoweri Museveni administration. Of course, there will be contestation from my colleague and all these kinds of things, because, I mean, that is the job of the opposition, to make sure that they oppose these things, even if it's a plus. But if I were them, what I would do is to praise first, and then I said, but we should have, if we were in a government, we should have done A, B, C, D, or we should have done this thing in a different fashion. That, to me, would make a little bit of sense.
Mr. Henry Mayiga, the Uganda's deputy ambassador to China, is also an NRM mobilizer. If you notice, I did give him a few minutes to let him actually expound on all the achievements of the NRM so that the Lord Mayor can also counter that. Now, Lord Mayor, here's your chance now. Right now, in the middle of this COVID-19 pandemic, should we be celebrating the NRM manifesto whatsoever right now?
Well, I'm really amused by the submissions of my brother here. The way he was parroting the NRM narrative, we brought peace, we have constructed ABC, and so on and so forth. I thought he would put this debate into context, into proper perspective, because we are talking about the NRM manifesto for 2016-2021. And definitely you would start with a theme. I doubt whether my brother here can recollect the theme of the manifesto of NRM. If you don't know it, then you can't come up with a good judgment, assessment, whether you have delivered or not. I personally, I must confess, I don't know, because we are just taken into a wilderness. I don't know what is happening exactly. I don't know the theme of the NRM manifesto. And going back to the real issue now, the word manifesto, we need to understand it. What does it entail? What does it mean? It's derived from a Latin word, manifestum. Manifestum means clearly manifesting your intentions, your agenda, clearly making a public declaration of your agenda, the development agenda. So what is the agenda of NRM for this particular period? I need to understand, I need to be educated. The little I know about it, and actually, if you recollect very well, they started there, they came up with what they called a manifesto, a semblance of a manifesto towards the end of the campaign. And what they are anchoring on as their own manifesto is a political statement, which came much, much later after the election, the general election, when they went to Chankwas and came up with the phrase, Chisanja hakuna mchezo. So what is it? What does it mean? Can you break it down for understanding? Certainly no. The other specific thing is, if I recollect very well, what they promised in Chisanja hakuna mchezo, middle income status by the year 2020. They promised Ugandans this is going to be a magical year where everyone in Uganda, the 44 million Ugandans, would be ushered into another status, economic status, so that all of us now would be within that income status, that bracket, where would be in position to earn at least $1,000 per capita income, $1,000. Right now, where do we stand? Less than 700. People are literally surviving by the grace of God. It's not by state design. It's not by government design, but by the grace of God that you see Ugandans surviving. So, and here is here. All over, I mean, telling Ugandans that, look here, we have come up with the hanging, whatever, and so on and so forth. You need to look at the parameters.
Does that mean that you don't agree with the Prime Minister when he says that they've achieved 77.9% of this manifesto implementation?
You see, you need to have benchmarks, even in economics, to get your balance sheet. You need to have those variables. Let him tell us what benchmarks is he using to come up with that score of 77%. The scorecard of 77%.
Yeah, he mentioned
against which marking scheme.
Yeah.
It has to be those parameters which I've talked about. Income status, how many people are within that bracket he's talking about. That is one. Two, he's talking about these isolated developments, the Entebbe Expressway, the Hanging Bridge and whatnot. Against which investment have we put in? Look at the figures. Let's get facts and figures right now. I'll give you the figures of our national budget right now. It stands at 45.5 trillion, 45.5. But 4 trillion is going towards servicing the public debt, which is piling up by the day. Every other day, it is piling up. Ugandans are choking on a public debt. Actually, what you are celebrating right now is the mortgaging of our country. They have mortgaged our country to the Western capitals. They have mortgaged our country to China. They have mortgaged our country to those Shylocks. That's what they have done right now. So the public debt is extremely huge. Actually, we can't even service it. Look at the national budget right now. 4 trillion is going toward servicing the public debt. Now coming to the security is talking about. Do you know we are out of the 45.5 trillion, 4.5 trillion is going towards national security. 4.5 trillion. And 2.8 trillion of 4.8 trillion is classified expenditure. They cannot explain where it has gone. When you look at the monies allocated to the office of the president, State House, literally for patronage, political patronage, for him just to give out handouts so that he can have the country under his armpit. He can subdue everyone else, that he can have his tentacles everywhere. It's really alarming. Colossal sums, every budget that is passed. So that's how they have squandered our resources. And it's just picking a few isolated things like he has mentioned. Honestly speaking, there is nothing to celebrate about that. This is what I'm saying. Let us look at this issue holistically. Look at the entire balance sheet. How much have we injected in and the returns we are getting? You'll find that the dividends are not there. So why celebrate losses?
Speaking of classified expenditures, Mr. Maega, there is this issue that has been taking center stage over the weekend that the NRM members of parliament are going to be receiving 40 million Uganda shillings as a thank you. First of all, is this a fact? And why is this coming up now?
First of all, I think I just wanted to respond very quickly.
Please do.
To what my colleague is talking about, that the NRM administration, the Yoweri Museveni administration has mortgaged the country. That is not true. And that we are failing to service the national debt that we have. That is also not true, because when the budget is written, usually there is a portion which definitely goes towards the settlement of the national debt that we have from those who are from our creditors. And year in, year out, Uganda has been on the dot in as far as servicing the national debt is concerned. Of course, in the world, as he knows, or he doesn't know, there is absolutely no country which doesn't borrow. Even the US borrows from China. And so it all goes to the fact that the Yoweri Museveni administration has been very smart because the debt is being serviced. And as you can see from his submission, actually,
No, it's not being serviced. That's not true.
But when you were talking,
No, not true.
when you were talking, I think I gave you.
It's about now 40%.
So you'll counter that. You'll counter that.
Over 40% of our GDP.
You'll counter that after
I
Mr.
wish we
Mike.
could give ourselves the time.
Go ahead.
Because
Okay.
Yes.
I did interrupt you as you submitted. But the fact of the matter is, we have not failed to service the national debt because every other time the budget is ready, if he has been attentive and if the opposition in this country, whose figures range around 30% in the country, and as far as the vote is concerned, the fact of the matter is the country has been servicing the debt, and that is written in every budget that is read by the Minister of Finance. We may have, of course, lots of problems and all these kinds of things. And coming out to the celebration, because you said that there is nothing to celebrate, I mean, all of those who are not blind, who see what this administration is doing, at least can see the expansion of the airport where he goes through. Sometimes we meet in the airport with him and we chat in the VIP lounge. I wish he could go down where the common person passes, but he passes via the lounge, and I'm sure if he's not blind, he sees that expansion. Now, going to the 40 million that you're talking about, because for me, that I have no confirmation of that one in the first place. But let's just make an assumption that it is either true or not true. It is one of those things which members of parliament have been talking about for a very long time in terms of facilitation. They're now talking about constituency task forces. I don't know whether it's going. I saw a disagreement the other day when the NRM caucus met. I'm not exactly very sure as to whether that actually 40 million Uganda shillings is going to be given to these members of parliament. And I don't want to belabor that one as far as I'm concerned. But rather to say that if it is true that the 40 million is going to be given to members of parliament for whichever purpose, because we need to know what the purpose is. If there is a right purpose for which that money is being given to these people, that should be understood in that context. But if it is not, then, but of course, at the moment, we don't have a confirmation of it. Somebody needs to pinpoint it and say that actually this money is going to be given out, and so has received it, or they are going to receive, or so and so is going to pay it out, and all these kinds of things. But I have no, personally, I have no confirmation as to whether the 40 million is going to be given out. Of course, I saw it in the press the other day. Was it yesterday or Saturday? And not everything that appears in the press is correct. Yeah.
Because the reason we are asking is because we are talking about 40 million being given to NRM MPs, and you have the National Task Force on COVID-19 asking employees to give at least 10,000 of their May salaries to this task force. So we were wondering, if government is asking for money and then giving it away, what is the rationale? That is the reason why we've been actually trying to expand on this conversation.
You are seeing, and you've said it, the task force has come out openly to say that those who are willing should donate 10,000, at least 10,000, to the effort to fight the pandemic. Yeah, that is in the open, and it has been affirmatively spoken out by the task force.
And some
but the 40 million, I have not seen anybody, either from government or the NRM administration, saying that we're going to give NRM MPs 40 million. I've not seen that one. I've not seen anybody. I've not seen the president. I've not seen anybody, not even the Secretary General of the NRM, saying that we're going to give the 40 million to members of parliament. I've not seen that one happen. But at least I can vouch for the task force, because it has come out very openly to say, let us contribute. And I'm willing to contribute just like any other right-thinking Ugandans who appreciate the fact that the task force must actually be enabled to perform its duties so that this pandemic is brought to an end.
Lord Mayor, we also have the issue of that 40 million. Help us understand, have we entered campaign mode? Because you have some experts who are saying that it's alleged that this 40 million will be given to NRM members so that they start campaigning for the president. What do you make of that?
Of course, with doling out money to NRM MPs, it's a matter within the public domain. And I don't think Mr. Museveni can deny that fact. The reason he came out to condemn Parliament when they appropriated 20 million to themselves, 10 billion to themselves out of the supplementary budget for COVID, it was not because he abhorred it, in as much as he said it is condemnable, reprehensible. That's the term he used. He didn't mean it. Of course, you know he doesn't have moral authority to talk about such issues. But the whole point was about who did what. He was offended by the fact that it is Kadag and MPs who appropriated the money without his consent, without his knowledge, because he is the giver of the handouts. That was the quarrel he had. Secondly, that you made it public. There are two things. Because actually his conscience betrayed him when he was addressing the nation on these routine addresses he always gives. He said, we had started on very well with the fight against COVID, because he thought he had managed to garner the public goodwill to support the struggle and so on and so forth. Now the MPs are coming in to throw a spanner simply because they made it public. It was not about the principle of giving out money. No. So the question was about who is giving it out. He wanted himself to do it. Now they have gone back to do it the NRM way. This time it was not the way they have been doing it. The money they gave towards the Ojikwatako, lifting the age limit, how it was done. I went to court personally, and eventually they conceded. They got 29 million ex gratia. It was ex gratia payment. Himself giving it out gratis. You get these handouts. 29 million. We challenged that in the court, and they all considered, but it's because it is him who gave it out. The 5 million that was given way back in 2005 to lift the term limits. It's all documented. And this money, this time round, every time we are going into an election, certainly he has to give out something to the NRM to do whatever they want. So for him to come out and deny this fact, I think, yes, it is expected of him, but the facts are there. And I think the reports he's talking about was in Sunday Monitor yesterday. And we also got bits from NTV here. For the one which was more detailed was the Sunday Monitor report. They gave out the particulars, the specifics. If you read it, honestly, you'd be convinced. The money given out from Katikati, the people were giving out, you know them, and so on and so forth. 40 million, you return 20, you retain 20. That was the deal. And eventually, you can see these MPs willingly coming out, the 317 who consented to the lifting of the age limit. They say, willingly coming out to say, we are returning the 20 million. Simply because there is a better deal. So, don't deny these facts. It's a fact that Yoweri Kaguta Museveni gives out money. He has turned himself into the person who is in charge of, because he places his hands on our coffers, on our till, then he purports to give out that money to the people whom he thinks are going to help him one way or the other to clear the way for his political ambitions. That's basically what he does. And the patronage is his middle name right now. He always wants to be seen like he's the alpha and omega when it comes to all these matters. But would you allow me a second or two?
Go ahead.
To respond to the issue of the national budget.
Yes.
The public, because it's critical, the issue of the public debt.
Yeah, address that when we get into NSSF.
Oh, wonderful. So this issue here, you see, I mentioned the 4 trillion in our budget, and he's saying they are servicing it. The 4 trillion which is allocated towards that particular vote is for service, paying the interest, not even the principal. No. Because right now we are staggering around 40% of our national budget, although they want to suppress it and bring it down to 36. It's coming to 40% of the GDP.
Indeed.
Honestly speaking, if we are servicing it, how would it shoot up to those, astronomical figures? How?
COVID-19 made it worse.
Exactly. So we are now, the economy right now is plummeting down to an abyss. And you are here giving a rosy picture that everything is okay, we are servicing the debt. So Ugandans, for the fact we are doing badly when it comes to the public debt. And the other thing I was talking about, getting our priorities right. When it comes to the agriculture sector, the allocation is around 1.3 trillion, 1.3 trillion out of 45 trillion. And this is where we claim to have a comparative advantage. And we are saying the bulk of our people are employed in the agriculture sector, majority of our people. So you are to create employment opportunities. Where do you invest most? Where do you put your investments?
In the food basket.
They promised to, we are going back now to that very issue of the manifesto. They promised to modernize agriculture, for example. And it was laughable how they intended to do it. They said they will distribute hand hose to every homestead. Hand hose. Imagine, you are talking of in this day and age, you are talking about modernizing agriculture, distributing hand hose. And even hand hose, up to now, I don't know how many homesteads, how many families have received this hand hose. So they have literally failed even to put the little investment one would expect in the agriculture sector. And he is here telling us that we are celebrating the NRM manifesto. It's very, very absurd.
Ambassador Maiga, you can pitch in and counter those submissions from the Lord Mayor. But before you do that, we also have the issue of whether or not we are forgetting the COVID-19 fight when we focus on the NRM manifesto. But first, counter those submissions.
Absolutely. Uganda has not become a pariah state. It's one thing which he needs to understand. I hope he's going to understand it. It's not a pariah state, and it hasn't reneged on its commitments in as far as settling the national debt is concerned. If it was, it would have come out very clearly that yes, you gentlemen and ladies, including the Lord Mayor and so on, the whole of you have failed to service the national debt. That has not come out, and I hope he knows about it. But of course he's doing his job, because the opposition is supposed to focus, the Baganda call it vitaka, so that you either wash yourselves off these vitaka and so on and so forth. That's very clear. So Uganda has not reneged in as far as settling its national debt is concerned. The second one is, of course, agriculture. He's talking about agriculture, modernization, and so on and so forth. Take the case of coffee, for instance, because Museveni, just a couple of years ago, he told the Coffee Development Authority that we want to produce 20 million bags. And at that time, we were doing at something like 1.2 to 2 million and so on and so forth, which was scaled up to 4 million. And now, right now, as we speak, it is over 5 million bags. Isn't that a miracle as well in agriculture, that we can export all these? And Uganda is the biggest exporter, for his information, biggest exporter of coffee on the African continent, even if Ethiopia is the biggest producer of coffee on the African continent. And you know how actually coffee fetches quite substantial amounts of foreign exchange to the country and so on. So in as far as national debt, we are not reneging. And as far as the 40 million, I have not seen a commitment from anybody, not the NRM, not the president, not the secretary general of my party, coming out openly to say that they're going to give the 40 million. If people within their whimsical thinking are coming out with this figure of 40 million, that is up to them. But I have not seen anything official to say that, yes, this is true, and so on and so forth.
Like it has always been the case with
you see
those handouts.
The problem with the opposition is that they don't listen. That is a feature which is a common characteristic of the opposition in this country.
You can go ahead.
You can listen and then counter much later. I have not seen the the NRM coming out to say that 40 million is going to be given to NRM MPs. Now, coming to forgetting COVID, I don't think it has been forgotten, because you can see that the task force is actually still active. And there are these series of meetings between the heads of state of East Africa, of course using teleconferencing, coming out with interventions in order to put a stop to this pandemic. And so this idea is not, if you are talking about the locusts, yes, I would agree with you, because the locusts, which everybody, especially the opposition, are saying now this thing has come, it's going to finish the country because this country is so so weak in terms of fighting off those kinds of things. The locusts are gone. I'm sure even the pandemic will go for as long as this very reasonable and very committed task force still does its job, is doing its job, and the Minister of Health is also doing its job, and the ORM7 administration is doing its job. The fight against the COVID-19 pandemic is going to be successful, and I don't believe it has been forgotten.
The reason why such a question keeps popping up in the political realm is simply because you have discussions of the 40 million being doled out to NRM MPs instead of the COVID-19 fight. You also have many other issues. The NRM manifesto week, which is now focusing on the achievements of the NRM instead of the cases that are coming out with regards to the COVID-19 pandemic. You also have the task force on COVID-19 asking employees to actually donate at least 10,000 Uganda shillings. It seems like they've forgotten that the pandemic affected these workers, and some of them are actually at work, at home without work, and some who are at work are actually suffering 30% pay cuts in their salary, others worse, 50% pay cuts. That's why many people are saying maybe the government has forgotten the effects of the pandemic.
Absolutely. Because you see, let's get this right. Because this country has actually had these kinds of problems before. We had Ebola, Marburg, and all those kinds of things, and the most recent one, as you know, is COVID-19. But when that pandemic came, when it began to cause problems for our country and also in the region, and of course the entire world, because this is not an exclusive problem of Uganda, it's all over the place. Once that problem came, it didn't mean that this country or the Yoweri Museveni administration would forget about the rest of the things, the rest of the commitments, the rest of the things that we were supposed to do in these 5 years after elections in 2016. And that's why it's very imperative that the Yoweri Museveni administration comes out to showcase or to show people what has so far been achieved. That's extremely important, because the pandemic cannot make us forget the rest of the things that are supposed to happen in the country. So that's why we have this manifesto week to say, hey, gentlemen, even if there is this problem with the pandemic, which is actually diverting resources that would otherwise have been invested in the rest of the sectors in the country, that look, we have these other things that we are doing. We are, for instance, when it comes to energy, we have this is Simba, which is complete, 183 megawatts plus to the national grid. And the Karuma, which is 93% finished, and probably before the end of this year, that also is going to add another 600 megawatts to the national grid. All these things Ugandans need to know that, yes, you have the pandemic in our midst, but even if we have that problem, there are these other things which are still happening. Agriculture is going on this way, the energy sector is going on this way, the security must continue, and that's why his Kampala city, where his Lord Mayor is actually peaceful and stable, because, yeah, it's peaceful and stable. That's why he was able to come from home to attend this talk show. If it wasn't stable, if it wasn't secure, and if there was no peace, he wouldn't have come here this morning. It wouldn't have come, because we must also realize where the country is coming from. Where the country is coming from. Because you remember, and unfortunately for me, I came from the UPC, and I remember the early years of the 80s, when it wasn't possible to have, anyway, these talk shows were not even available. But that time, the studios were not. So this opportunity which has been afforded.
Would you say it was UPC responsible for
this
that?
Opportunity
that
which has been, this opportunity which has been afforded, Mr. Lukwago, my good brother, Owenchima, to come to the studio never existed, and they must be thankful to the Yoweri Museveni administration because of these kinds of things that have been afforded to them, including talk shows where they come and insult the president, talk all sorts of things and all this. And really, these are the things which have happened. And so the NRM administration, the Yoweri Museveni administration, is rightfully doing its duty of ensuring that they inform Ugandans what has been achieved in the last 4 years, and there is still so much coverage to do to the elections.
Of course, Mr. Maega, that's what we would expect in an upright democracy. You can take an example from Capitol Hill in the United States. When Nancy Pelosi tore President Trump's State of the Union address, what happened to her? Nothing, because it's a democracy. Well, you can disagree to agree. That's politics. Mr. Lukwago, let's talk about the 20% that is supposed to be given to the workers, but then it's causing loggerheads within Parliament and other cabinet ministers. Why is it taking so long for this 20% to reach the worker when you're looking at other countries like the United States doling out at least $1,400 to an individual? Yes, if you're a couple, you'll get double the money. But then you're looking at Uganda, where we are even asking the worker who might have been laid off or who is actually suffering some pay cuts to actually contribute 10,000 Uganda shillings to the National Task Force combating COVID-19. Should the workers compulsorily contribute actually this money?
Well, before I come to that, allow me express.
Please do.
Yeah, I was intrigued by his statement here, giving that history of UPC and the turmoil we have had as a country. I expected him to face straight in the camera there and apologize to Ugandans that while in UPC, they caused mayhem, atrocities. Of course, I'm not agreeing with him 100% that it was UPC which was entirely responsible for that anarchy. But I wanted him to say, oh, Ugandans, we are really sorry for what we did while in UPC at that time, if he was honest. But another thing is about the NRM week. I thought they would be gracious enough to say, well, given the situation we are faced with, everything else has come to a standstill. We have suspended celebrations, social functions, and whatnot. What is it that is stopping them from saying we suspended the celebration of the NRM manifesto week? Is it a do or die matter that in the midst of the war we are embroiled in as a country right now, they must celebrate?
When it comes to accountability, yes.
When it comes to accountability, of course, there should be mechanisms of holding government accountable. It doesn't need to be these public statements. So there must be systems in place, like going through the accountability systems. They should be there, only that they have been decapitated by this government. Because accountability should be handled by now Parliament, should be handled by the IGG, should be handled by the Auditor General and all these other institutions, but they have rendered them dysfunctional. That's again another debate. But coming back to the issue of the 20% NSSF, I'll look at it from a broader perspective. It's about the entire war. Again, we are involved in. Time and again, we have come out to state in no uncertain terms in our formation, the people's government,
yes,
that this war ought to have been structured. We ought to have come up with a framework, both legal and administrative, on how to fight this battle. Right now, there isn't any. There is no legal framework to deal with this, yet the Constitution provides for that framework and Article 110 and other relevant provisions on how to do it, where you bring all these institutions on board. The role of Parliament clearly defined, the role of other stakeholders and the citizenry, the role they have to play. It has to be clearly defined within the given constitutional framework. That was not done. And to borrow the words of my senior, Dr. Besigye, said Museveni turned this into his warfare, more or less becoming a warlord who wants to exude that character of a person who can manage it himself. Nobody else should help him. So this is exactly what we are contending with. Otherwise, all these issues would fit within that framework. This would bring in the question of the social security systems. How do we get to address those shocks? How do we absorb those shocks which are affecting the economy, which are affecting our communities? There must be a well-strewn system in place and say, this is what we need to come up with. Right now, there isn't any. Because if we were to do that, we would now be revisiting the NSSF Act, for example, to say, look here, those people who have been saving with NSSF, it's time now to access the facility. It's time to access their savings. You and I, who are in formal employment, we are forced to save with NSSF in preparation for a rain day like this. That should it happen that you are encumbered with these crises.
So what is stopping the NSSF?
The argument they are giving is twofold. One, the legal encumbrances, because there is no, in the scheme, the NSSF scheme, there is no such provision, there is no such benefit within the law. And I agree with them. But that shouldn't be an impediment. Where you have a mechanism under Article 110, Parliament is empowered to come up with the legislations that can give effect to the measures taken to address a crisis like this pandemic like this. So that would be one of the issues to be handled by Parliament. They would even suspend the procedures, the rules of procedure, to pass it expeditiously. Everyone else would give them their goodwill and say, please, go ahead and amend the law. The other thing would be about the social safety nets, the way they would structure the provision of relief to the people. There would be a fund for relief, for example. Now the relief fund they created was for the Kampala and Wachiso, and they allocated 59 billion just to give out food. not other amenities of life, just food, which they have even dismally failed to distribute.
In some areas, they did get the
In
food.
some areas, yes, they have gone there, but as in the words of the speaker, giving out rotten food and expired milk. So I was saying it's not structured. We don't know what is required. It's only recently when they came out and said, now we are putting in place a national task force, where they are, which one, I think it is, I saw Mere Karoro Kurutu and this man of Quality Chemicals, Katongole, coming out to say, now Ugandans should be compelled. I don't want to buy into their rhetoric that they are just asking, they are appealing to your goodwill to say, give out voluntarily. No. The moment you talk of writing to the CEOs that please ask all your employees to contribute 10,000, it's mandatory. I can imagine my friend Busiku here, if they wrote, I'm sorry, to the CEO of NTV, ask Busiku to contribute, and the CEO writes to you. Of course, even if you have your own reservation, you would be constrained to express yourself and say, no, I am not contributing. That's what they call undue influence in law. So they were exerting undue influence on you. For heaven's sake, how can a state which has just passed a supplementary budget of 304 billion, with the 10 billion going to MPs, you can cry out and say, let Ugandans contribute. I laughed when they said, so far they have collected 27 billion.
But of course, going back
Let me give you these facts.
Go ahead.
27 billion. That's what they have called, and both in pledges and cash. And in the cash, they said, I think it's 15 billion. Do you know how much they paid to buy Usafi Market land? Just here in Kampala, 43 billion. They got 43 billion and signed a contract to buy a market here. Now the entire country fighting a war of this magnitude, a pandemic of this nature, which has ravaged not only Uganda but the world.
Let's focus.
They are appealing to Uganda to contribute 27 billion. They said 107. It's laughable. It's ridiculous.
Let's focus on the worker before I bring in Ambassador Maiga. Well, the worker needs this 20%. Geraldine Sally, the former MD NSSF, says there is nothing stopping Byarugaba, the current MD, from giving out this 20%. Now, in your opinion, I would like to hear from you as a lawmaker. What is actually stopping these people from actually giving out this money?
This money is not there. I'm telling you, this money is not there. They have always explained to you, if you listen to Byarugaba, he said 80% of this facility is in treasury bills and bonds. And the worst creditor in this country, rather debtor in this country, the world over, is government. And when it comes to NRM government, oh my God, it's terrible. So they said it's in government bonds and treasury bills. Would you expect this government, which is looking for 10,000 from you as a worker, as a contribution, to liquidate those treasury bills, to cash the bills? Would you expect them now to bring the money? Because now they would be recalled and say, please, bring cash, we want money.
That was Byarugava's worry.
So they are saying that money is not there. So the money was taken by government. It's not there. Literally, it's not there. Every month, I think, they collect not less than 100 billion. Every month. NSS collects not less than 100 billion. So they would be in a position right now, 20% would be nothing. And they shouldn't even complicate it. There are those who may not go out to get it.
The viewer who is watching right now,
because it would be discretion.
The viewer who is watching right now might get the wrong impression and think maybe the Lord Mayor is just opposing ideas that are just coming from the other side of the NRM. We would like to know, why are you always on the other side? Yes, why are you always opposing new ideas from the NRM government? We'd like to know that. And what are your plans for Kampala?
The NSSF bill before Parliament came from Cabinet. Who is opposing it? Mr. Museveni himself. Isn't that a contradiction? Before a bill goes to Parliament, it has to be passed by Cabinet. They sat in Cabinet, passed the bill, went to Parliament. Now he's opposing it. So what have we opposed? The fight against COVID, if I may come to the specifics about now the war we are involved in. Which goodwill haven't we given to Mr. Museveni to fight? Honestly speaking. Listen, Have I called a demonstration in Kampala to fight, despite the fact that you Kampalans are hard hit by the measures taken by Mr. Yoweri Museveni, and the fact that they are not grounded on the constitutional framework. They are illegal, so to speak. We have stomached this and said, okay, in the interest of fighting this pandemic, okay, let's close one eye and let this pass. We have not gone to court to challenge this or this. Elsewhere it has been done. In Malawi, they were declared illegal. In Kenya, they are demonstrating. In most states, there were declarations of states of emergency. But here, no, there were declarations of a state of emergency in several states. But here, it's a one-man's affair. You get it? So, tell me, and to be more specific, even when they came here in Kampala, they said, please, hands off my battle. Who is responsible in Kampala? The minister in charge, the deputy minister, the RCCs are the ones who are calling shots in Kampala. They even imported MPs from elsewhere, the Bariomushis, the Majezis, Ogwang, Kafuz, and others. They are all running roughshots here in Kampala. They are all over.
I'm afraid we've run out of time. Maybe let me just end with Ambassador Maiga by telling us whether or not we should postpone these elections if the pandemic stays with us. I have a minute for you, and then we call it wraps.
Because you consume much of the time, rambling, and so on and so forth. It's really hilarious that he still talks about an existent thing called people government. That thing is not there; it is illegal. And a man of his stature to be talking about people, what is it? People's government, and so on and so forth. It's quite hilarious. And he was, of course, digging out the UP's history of the 80s, and he reminded me of what was happening in Rakai, where DPs, where he comes from, is a DP. Is just, I mean, when he talks about people's government, that doesn't make a lot of sense. The DP, how it was,
it's you indicted.
how the DPs, the DPs in Rakai were throwing pieces of pork and a booze in wells used by UPC Muslims in Rakai.
Ambassador, we've run out of time. Should we postpone this election or not?
The election, first of all, we'll cross the bridge when we reach it, because as of now, the election must be on. But should circumstances create an environment in which we cannot have that election, then that definitely is going to be a totally different scenario. Because you cannot say that the pandemic is now becoming worse and therefore we should have elections and people should queue lines and all these kinds of things. It becomes difficult. But I would rather imagine a situation where the preparations for those elections continue for as long as we can imagine that there will be a suitable environment for us to have those elections.
Ambassador Maiga and the Lord Mayor of Kampala, that is Arias Lukwago, joining me right here on set, talking about many issues. NRM Manifesto Week, the 40 million that actually was given to NRM MPs, allegedly. We are yet to get more information on that, so and a lot more. Should we postpone them? Yes or no?
An allegation.
A Kasare response. You want a Kasare response?
Yes or no? Yes.
Oh no, honestly, I can't do that. I know Museveni cannot organize free and fair elections. Whether postponed or not, I'm sure we are not going to have free and fair elections.
Let's go for a short break. I have Judith Malemo. She's an expert. We are going to be talking about cyber security. She's live on Zoom after this break.